By my colleague, business editor Tolulokwe Ogunjobi, and joining us online is a professor of capital markets, and he is Professor Uche Walike. I'll begin with you, Tolu. We began this conversation at 7.
Earlier.
Yes, and then continuing. You know, one statement that the president made is that food security shall remain a national priority. Now, we're unclear about what figures exactly are dedicated to this. But what does this say about the president, especially when you compare this to what we had in previous budgets?
Well, indeed, it's clear that the president is ready to address the issue of insecurity, which has affected farmers from going to the farms. He's talked clearly about agricultural inputs, improving the food security. And, you know, the issue of mechanizing farming is something that has been on the front burner. And you will notice that states like Niger, Lagos, we can at least take 3-4 states that are really taking agriculture so seriously. The issue of also post-harvest losses is something that the president mentioned. Clearly, he said, we're going to reduce post-harvest losses, improve income for smallholder farmers. Also, the issue of commodities exchange is something that the president has been talking about. And we've seen the likes of Lagos already even coming up in that space. So I think a lot is going to be done in regards to agriculture, food security, which is very important because the price of food determines what Nigerians would say about government. Because when you have food on your table cheaper, you definitely commend government. So I think a lot of work is being done around that space. Agriculture remains very key. And whatever government is doing to make sure that the price of foodstuff remains cheap, affordable, accessible, and can reach from the rural areas to the urban areas where infrastructure comes in, which also has a high part of this budget, I think it remains key. Very key,
and especially because also security has something to do with food insecurity.
They work together.
With food security, right?
Yes.
So bringing in Professor Walike here, you know, just as in the past, this particular budget proposal for 2026, you know, has defense and security, you know, taking what you call the largest chunk, 5.41 trillion naira. What does this say about this administration's commitment to tackling insecurity?
Yes, just as Tolu rightly pointed out, insecurity is a binding constraint to anything you want to do in the budget, any priority that you have, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's education, whether it is health. Without security, of course, you're not going to achieve that. So it is in that light that one welcomes the attention being given to, you know, security. Of course, the president has talked about a reset in the security architecture. That's very key. You know, determination now, renewed commitment to tackle banditry, to tackle, you know, terrorism. You saw the sweeping definition of who a terrorist is now.
Indeed.
So once you are carrying arms and you are a non-state actor, you are labeled, you know, a terrorist. So that tells you the level of commitment this administration, you know, wants to give to attention. They want to give to, you know, security. And then following security, one would also expect, understandably, that infrastructure should be taken under lion's share. We can see infrastructure getting 3.5 you know, trillion naira, you know, next to security, which got around 5.6 trillion. But again, in my view, if you convert that in dollar terms, that's about $2.5 billion. So I also think that the infrastructure, you know, should you know, get a lot more. What it is getting now is, you know, not adequate. Of course, you also find education and health, you know, receiving attention. So I think in all the priorities are right, beginning with, you know, security, you know, of course. And the issue of agriculture that Tolu also mentioned, yes, we see the president talking about not only mechanization, but also investment in storage facilities, you know, the concern about reducing post-harvest losses. I think that will go a long way in boosting food security.
All right. And Prof, you know that, of course, a large chunk of the funding for this budget would come from crude oil, and the government is at this time projecting 1.84 million barrels per day production, and it has pegged the benchmark for, you know, crude oil at $64.85 per barrel. Would you say this is overambitious or just very, I mean, conservative?
No. If you look at what we know from the international energy agencies, you know, what they have predicted, $64.85 dollars per barrel, I think, is realistic. The same for the exchange rate of 1,400 naira. If you look at where our reserves, is now, over $46 billion, and all that the central bank is doing to put, transparency in the forex market. So 1,400 naira to the dollar is realistic. Now, but what I consider the most fragile aspect of that benchmark, the vulnerable part is the oil production. Oil production of 1.84 million barrels per day, I think, is somewhat on the high side. Is a little ambitious. Given our historical average in the last 5 years, we've not been able to do up to 1.7 million barrels per day. So I would have suggested maybe using 1.7, 1.5 million barrels per day, as opposed to the 1.84 million barrels per day, because if we miss that target, it will heighten the the fiscal risk in this budget. So I would have preferred a lower figure based on our experience than the 1.84 million barrels per day. We know the challenges are still there: underinvestment by international oil companies, aging infrastructure, issues of theft, pipeline vandalism. These issues are still there, even though they have reduced, considerably. But I would have expected that we applied a little more conservatism with respect to oil production.
Prof, you're a professor of capital markets. I know that earlier, Tolu was trying to explain to me that he thinks, this figure is actually fair, considering what the country has been able to do in recent time, especially also with the ability to manage tension in the Niger Delta. We're not hearing about pipeline vandalism and all of that. But I'm also curious as to what you think about the president pegging the average exchange rate at 1,400 naira to a dollar.
Is 1,400, right? Not 1,2.
Oh, 1,400. Yeah, 1,400.
Fair enough.
Yeah, 1,400. Yes, it's realistic. And for me, it's a lot better. In fact, when I saw the number, I said, that's a lot. That's fine, because the number they had, if you saw the medium-term expenditure framework, 2026 to 2028, which of course is the basis for preparing the 2026 budget. In that medium-term expenditure framework, what they used initially was 1,512 naira, and at that time I thought it was, we are going to risk overestimating our revenues. But I'm happy that they went back, worked on it, and then the FEC now approved the revised medium-term expenditure framework, which now has 1,400. So I think 1,400 is a lot more realistic. But again, if you look at the numbers generally, 58 trillion, you might think is large, but again, in dollar terms, that's about $40 billion. That's still not, for a country like Nigeria, it's still not, you wouldn't consider that as much. And then you're also looking at I'm more concerned about the deficit, Tolu. The deficit is 4.28% of GDP.
Of GDP,
that's about 24 trillion naira deficit. Okay, and the financing, you will agree, will be more of borrowing. We are going to borrow to finance that, and already we have 15 trillion naira, as 15.5 trillion is going into debt service in 2026. Okay, if you combine what has been allocated to education, 3.5 trillion, health, 2.5 trillion, infrastructure, 3.5 trillion. If you add all of that, even if you add, look at the figures you're showing, yes, if you add all of that, the amount for debt servicing, which is 15.5, is higher than all of that. That tells you the burden of debt that we are having. So I think going forward, every attention should be made. Of course, that also depends on how quickly we ramp up revenues to be able to make this debt sustainable. I think more money, but I'm happy that that capital component is getting attention. 26 trillion, is for capital, unlike what we used to have in the past.
All right, Prof. Well, the ball is now in the court of the lawmakers. Wait to see how they manage this, and there will also be the likelihood of increasing it when they discover that some areas need some more attention. Prof, it's been. I
want to mention something very, very quickly. Yes.
In 15 seconds, Prof. 15 seconds.
Yes, and that's the fact that I am happy that now the government is now focusing on delivery. It's focusing on execution.
Yes.
The president said it. that the greatest budget is the budget that is not the budget that is announced, but the one that
is implemented.
And the president has given assurances that this time around the story will be different.
Yeah. Professor Uche Waleke is a professor of capital markets. As a matter of fact, the first Nigerian to clinch that. Thank you so much for your time on TVC News at 10.
Thank you.
Also, my wonderful colleague Tolu Lopo Ogunjobi, business editor. Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis tonight, Tolu.
Thank you.